Neck stiffness after 60 is one of the most common complaints people bring up, and yet most of them have never actually been taught how to fix it, because what usually happens is that someone stretches a little, rolls their head around a few times, maybe reaches for some pain relievers, and yet the compression remains, the tightness returns within hours, and over time that constant pressure on the joints, the discs, and the nerves quietly steals away mobility, comfort, and confidence without anyone quite noticing it happening. And research has shown that seniors living with chronic neck compression have significantly higher rates of headaches, shoulder pain, and even radiating numbness down into the arms. Not because anything is seriously damaged in a structural sense, but because gravity, poor posture, and years upon years of sitting have slowly squeezed the neck into a position it was never designed to hold for so long. And the good news, the doctor explains, is that this compression can be reversed at home, without any special equipment, and without a single trip to a clinic, which is exactly the promise of this episode of the Senior Health Podcast, where East meets West to help people move freely, feel younger, and stay independent well into their later years. And in this episode, one of Japan's most experienced physicians walks through 4 proven decompression techniques that anyone can do safely at home to release pressure from the neck. Open up the joints, stretch the discs, and finally give the neck the space it has been craving for years. And listeners are encouraged to stay through to the end because they will learn exactly which technique fits their own particular situation, since not every neck responds the same way to the same approach. John opens by asking the doctor why this particular episode matters so much, and the doctor responds that this is one of the most important episodes they have ever done for anyone suffering from a tight, locked-up neck, because what most people describe simply as stiffness is, in a more precise sense, actual compression. The kind produced when gravity pushes down on the body every single day, and poor posture compounds that pressure further and further, until the neck begins to feel as though it is being squeezed from above, producing that telltale turtleneck appearance where the head seems to sink down into the shoulders. And yet, the doctor insists, this is not a permanent condition, because the 4 techniques covered in this episode create space where there was none before. And relief very often begins within seconds of trying them. John agrees, nodding that this matches what he consistently hears from people, namely that the tightness never fully goes away no matter what remedies they try on their own. And before diving further, he invites listeners to comment on 1 if their neck feels stiff most days, and a 2 if they have ever felt that tightness radiating outward into the shoulders or upper back. And the doctor encourages everyone watching or listening to share where they are starting from, since whether the stiffness is mild or severe. These 4 decompression techniques are designed to meet each person exactly where they currently stand. John then asks the doctor to lay out the fundamentals before moving into the techniques themselves, wanting to know what is actually happening inside the neck as this compression builds up and why it tends to worsen specifically after the age of 60. And the doctor explains patiently that the neck is not simply a column of muscle, but a complex structure containing 7 vertebrae, cushioning discs sitting between each one, joint capsules toward the back, ligaments holding the entire assembly together, and of course the spinal cord and surrounding nerves running straight through the center of it all. And when posture is good and movement happens regularly throughout the day, all of these structures have the space they need, gliding freely, flexing properly, and functioning the way they are meant to function. But the doctor notes that gravity never stops pulling downward, and most people spend decades sitting at desks, hunching forward, staring down at phones and computer screens, and over time this forward head posture compresses the front portion of the discs while simultaneously tightening the muscles running along the back of the neck, causing the joints to gradually lose their normal range of movement, the ligaments to shorten, and eventually the whole neck begins to feel locked, stiff, and unusually heavy, which some patients describe as feeling like their head is being pushed straight down into their body. And John recognizes this immediately as the turtleneck appearance the doctor mentioned earlier, and the doctor confirms that this is exactly right. The head migrates forward over time, the upper back rounds increasingly, and the neck ends up squeezed in between these 2 shifting structures, a compression that affects the discs directly, irritates the surrounding nerves, and can even interfere with normal blood flow through the region. and the longer this pattern continues uninterrupted. The more the body simply accepts it as the new normal, which is precisely why these 4 techniques exist, to create real, physical space within the neck through what the doctor calls self-traction or decompression, gently pulling the various structures apart from one another, giving the discs room to breathe and rehydrate, allowing the joints to open back up, and letting the surrounding muscles finally relax after years of chronic tension. And because each technique addresses a different set of tissues, some working on the front of the neck, some on the back, and others on the sides, by the end of the episode, listeners will have a clear sense of which particular technique their own neck responds to best. Before moving into the demonstrations themselves, John asks whether there are any cautions listeners should be aware of, and the doctor briefly notes that the neck is a genuinely sensitive area of the body. So anyone dealing with degenerative disc disease, an existing disc bulge, rheumatoid arthritis, or osteoporosis should check with their own doctor before attempting any of these movements. And more generally, if any movement at any point causes actual pain, the person should stop immediately. Since these techniques are meant to produce relief, never strain. From there, the two move into the first technique, which the doctor introduces as the simplest yet one of the most effective of the 4, requiring absolutely no equipment at all, just a person's own body and their awareness of it. And despite how simple it appears on the surface, this single movement directly addresses the postural compression that builds up gradually from years of sitting, hunching forward, and staring down at screens. And the doctor recommends sitting upright on the edge of a bed with the feet planted flat on the floor, avoiding any slouching, since good posture forms the foundation for the entire stretch. And from that seated position, the first movement is to pull the shoulders back, imagining the shoulder blades squeezing together behind the body. And once that is achieved, the next step is to pull the shoulders downward as well, visualizing the shoulder blades sliding down the back and away from the ears, which alone begins to traction the lower portion of the neck by creating separation between the shoulders and the base of the skull, something many people never realize they need, since they habitually carry their shoulders up near their ears without noticing it. And releasing that particular pattern brings noticeable relief almost immediately, at which point the chin tuck is added on top of the shoulder positioning, gently pulling the chin backward as though making a double chin. With no concern at all for how this might look, since this posterior glide of the head realigns the cervical spine and takes direct pressure off the joints toward the back of the neck. And while holding this position, it helps to imagine a string attached to the very top of the head, gently pulling upward toward the ceiling, elongating the entire spine from the tailbone all the way up to the crown of the head, so that the full sequence becomes shoulders back, shoulders down, chin tuck, and a gentle upward pull. And when performed correctly, this produces a stretch that runs from the base of the skull all the way down through the mid-back into the thoracic spine, a complete spinal elongation that should be held for 10 to 15 seconds while breathing normally, then released completely before repeating the sequence anywhere from 5 to 10 times throughout the day. And for anyone working at a desk, doing this once every hour is a reasonable target, since it requires no equipment whatsoever and can be done seated at a desk, in a parked car, or even while standing in line somewhere. And because it directly addresses the postural compression that accumulates hour by hour, practicing it regularly helps prevent stiffness from building up in the first place, with many patients reporting that this single exercise noticeably changes how their neck feels by the end of a long workday. The second technique goes considerably deeper, using gravity itself along with the natural weight of a person's own head to open up both the front and back of the neck in ways that seated stretches simply cannot reach on their own. And this one requires a flat surface, such as a bed, where the head can extend off the edge, while the rest of the body remains fully supported and stable. And it is performed in 2 distinct directions, the first opening the front of the neck and the discs, the second opening the back of the neck in a way that is particularly helpful for people who experience cervicogenic headaches, meaning headaches that originate from tension and compression within the neck rather than from the brain itself. And for the front-facing version, a person lies on their back with the head securely supported, then slowly shifts backward until the head begins to extend off the edge of the bed, going only as far as feels comfortable. Since some people will only tilt slightly into a gentle extension, while others will let the head hang back much further, and both approaches are considered effective, with the underlying goal being to use the natural weight of the head to gently stretch the muscles at the front of the neck, particularly the sternocleidomastoid and the scalene muscles, while simultaneously opening up the front portion of the intervertebral discs. And research published in a physical therapy journal in 2017 found that extension-based neck exercises of this kind significantly reduced disc-related symptoms and improved cervical range of motion among adults dealing with chronic neck pain, since extending the neck in this controlled way creates space specifically at the front of the spine, exactly where compression tends to build up from years of forward head posture, allowing the disc's room to rehydrate and decompress naturally. And this position should be held anywhere from 15 to 60 seconds depending on individual comfort, breathing slowly and deeply throughout, letting gravity do the actual work rather than forcing the stretch. And when finished, coming back up very slowly, supporting the head with a hand if necessary and resting for a moment before sitting fully upright, since moving too quickly out of this position can occasionally cause dizziness. And for the second version of this same technique, the person flips over onto their stomach with the arms resting comfortably at the sides or slightly behind the body, then shifts forward until the head extends off the edge of the surface, this time facing downward toward the floor, letting the head hang gently while the whole body relaxes completely, producing a stretch felt specifically in the back of the neck, particularly at the base of the skull where the suboccipital muscles attach. And this version is the one specifically suited to relieving cervicogenic headaches, since these small but remarkably influential suboccipital muscles, when tight, can refer pain upward into the head, behind the eyes, and into the temples, and allowing them to release gradually under the gentle weight of the head helps break that entire tension pattern, with this position also held for 15 to 60 seconds while breathing deeply and slowly. And again, returning to an upright position very gradually once finished, and the doctor recommends trying both directions and simply noticing which one the neck seems to prefer, since some people need more release toward the front of the neck because they have spent years hunched forward, while others need more release toward the back because they carry the bulk of their tension at the base of the skull, and ultimately the body itself will indicate which version is needed most. The third technique introduces a simple towel, which gives a person precise, controlled ability to apply traction exactly where the neck needs it most, requiring nothing more than a small hand towel or even a scarf, held with both hands roughly shoulder-width apart. And to begin, a person sits with good posture and places the towel behind the neck so that it rests in the mid to upper portion, roughly where the cervical spine naturally curves inward, holding one end of the towel in each hand. Then extending the head slightly backward in a gentle tilt while pulling upward on both ends of the towel simultaneously, which tractions the back of the neck, creating space between the vertebrae and gently separating the facet joints from one another, and the resulting sensation is typically felt as a gentle but very definite stretch along the back of the neck, with some people feeling it much deeper, almost within the spine itself as the joints decompress, while others feel it extending further down into the upper back between the shoulder blades. And it helps to take a moment adjusting the exact placement of the towel to find the position where the stretch feels most comfortable, since small shifts in towel placement can noticeably change where the stretch is actually felt. Holding this position for 15 to 30 seconds while breathing normally and repeating up to 5 times, and research published in a rehabilitation medicine journal in 2016 found that manual cervical traction of this kind significantly improved neck pain and disability scores among patients dealing with chronic cervical conditions, meaning the towel method allows a person to essentially replicate that same clinical traction at home, adjusting both force and angle to match their own specific needs and effectively becoming their own therapist in the process. And the second application of the towel addresses the lateral structures of the neck instead, which is particularly useful for releasing tension that accumulates from staring at screens for long periods, sleeping in awkward positions, or repeatedly carrying a bag on one shoulder. And for this version, a person shortens one end of the towel significantly and begins by stretching the right side of the neck, placing the longer end of the towel over the left ear and across the forehead, while the shorter end remains anchored at the back of the neck by the right hand, then gently pulling with the top arm holding the longer end, producing a combination of slight rotation and upward pressure rather than any twisting or compression, which produces a stretch felt along the right side of the neck, possibly extending into the upper trapezius and levator scapulae muscles, and the same process is then repeated on the opposite side, shortening the opposite end of the towel, wrapping the longer portion over the right ear and forehead, anchoring with the left hand, and tractioning the left side of the neck instead, with many people discovering in the process that one side of their neck is noticeably tighter than the other, which is both normal and useful information, worth spending a little extra time addressing. Holding each side for 15 to 30 seconds, and this particular stretch tends to be especially effective for people who wake up with a stiff neck or who notice tension gradually creeping into their shoulders as the afternoon wears on. The fourth and final technique uses a person's own elbows as a stable fulcrum to create powerful decompression with complete control. And once again, no equipment required at all. And the doctor considers this one of their personal favorites because it allows a person to generate meaningful traction using nothing more than body position and leverage, using the elbows and forearms as a stable base from which to gently pull the head away from the shoulders, creating space throughout the entire cervical spine, and the setup begins with kneeling beside a bed, since the softness of the mattress protects the elbows, then cupping the back of the skull with both hands, either interlacing the fingers behind the head or simply resting them against the base of the skull, whichever feels most natural, while placing the elbows on the bed roughly shoulder-width apart. And from that position, the person slowly lowers their body downward and backward while keeping the elbows firmly planted on the bed. And as the body drops, gently pulling upward with the hands, in a motion the doctor compares to a reverse tricep extension, since instead of pushing weight away from the body, the person is pulling the head upward while the body itself moves down and back, producing a controlled traction that runs through the entire cervical spine, from the base of the skull down to the top of the thoracic spine, and this position is generally held for 10 to 30 seconds, breathing deeply throughout without holding the breath, with the ideal hand position varying from person to person, since some prefer placing the meaty part of the thumbs against the base of the skull, others use their fingertips, and still others interlace their fingers completely. And it is worth experimenting to find whichever position produces the best stretch with the least strain on the hands and wrists, and when performed correctly, this should produce a gentle pulling sensation running through the entire neck, almost as though someone were lifting the head away from the body, with no pain, no pinching, and no sharp sensations at any point. And if any discomfort does arise, the intensity should be reduced immediately, since the stretch itself should feel relieving, almost pleasant. Though many people do report hearing small clicks or pops as the joints decompress, which is generally considered normal unless it produces actual pain, in which case the movement should be stopped. And for anyone who finds this particular hand position uncomfortable, a towel can be used instead, wrapped behind the neck in the same kneeling position with both ends held in front of the body, pulling upward on the towel as the body sits down and back, distributing the force more evenly and offering even greater control, so that ultimately there are two equally valid options: hands cupped behind the head or a towel wrapped behind the neck, and a person is free to choose whichever feels better or simply alternate between the two. And as the episode draws to close, the doctor's advice is to try all 4 techniques over the following few days, paying attention to which ones produce the greatest sense of relief. Noting personally that the neck elongation stretch and the towel traction tend to be favorites, though every neck is genuinely different, and consistency matters far more than intensity, since a neck that has been compressed for years deserves patience rather than a rushed fix, with gentle decompression performed daily producing lasting change over time. And if any movement at any point causes pain or dizziness, the appropriate response is to stop immediately and consult a doctor. And John closes the episode by thanking the doctor and encouraging everyone listening to start with the neck elongation stretch today. Just 30 seconds to begin, noticing how it feels and sharing in the comments which technique ends up working best for them.